My pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, Ed Malouf. He's class of 1985, BFA Graphic Design, and he is chair of the MassArt Alumni Leadership Council. For the last 25 years, Ed has been working in the field of museum exhibition design, interpretive graphics, and lately has begun to work in architectural graphics, the field he originally started in when graduating from MassArt. So Ed, please take it away.
Thank you, Darlene, and everyone else from Alumni Relations and Career Development who help make our Alumni Association idea a reality here. But most especially, thank you to the panelists who have shown up for tonight. So I just want to ask you all to briefly introduce yourself to our audience. We can start with Dan.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much for having me. Dan Vlahos here. I'm a graphic design alum from 2000 and also a DMI alum from 2017. I am currently serving as president of AIGA Boston, which is the professional organization for communication and graphic designers. And I work as a senior lecturer at Bentley University. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Jim.
Hi, Jim Taroni, industrial design class of '07. So I've worked as an industrial designer, and I'm currently working as the digital product designer for Microsoft. Um, Anything else I should add to that, Ed?
That was good. All
All right.
right. How about Laura?
Hi, I am a architecture undergrad in '08, and then the master's MArch in 2011. I worked after my master's, worked in architecture for a number of years. I stopped counting. And then about 2 years ago, I transitioned to working in engineering consulting and doing enclosure consulting. It just took a little pivot there recently.
All right, and I'm last. Hi, I'm Karen Schultz. I am joining you from Los Angeles, and I'm excited to be here to talk with everyone today. I have a degree from the Massachusetts College of Art, graduate of 1999 in fashion, and I currently work at a company called Jerry Lee of California. There we do a lot of licensed products. So I work with companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, all sorts of good stuff, and do a lot of really a lot of mass market goods at the moment. However, I've worked in film and for some smaller companies also, but that's my current job. Thank you.
Very good. So because this is geared towards folks who are about to graduate, and they are like making that transition from the comfort of Massachusetts College of Art to the big, bad, real world of employment in our country. I'm going to start with the first question as being, where did you all get your first position, and how was it like getting your first position? Were you able to get right into your industry right away, or was there some time where you had to like do something else? And I think this is a question for each one of you. Whoever wants to start.
I'm unmuted right now, so I'll go. So I'll start. So I did actually. My first job was in the industry. I actually did an internship at the place that first hired me. So I did an internship summer of 1997. I didn't get any credit for it, but I did get my first job from that. So it was a few months out of college. And after looking and looking, I ended up taking kind of like a really, it was a very low position. I was a cutter, and I cut fabric and patterns and all sorts of fun stuff and stood on my feet all day. But that was my first job, and moved up at that very company like pretty quickly soon thereafter. So yes.
Oh, sounds like a good one. Next.
Why don't you popcorn it to somebody, Ed?
All right. Oh, Jim, since you happen to be next to Karen in my mosaic.
Sure. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to land a job in industrial design right out of school. There was a couple weeks gap where I was still trying to figure out where I end up and taking interviews in, a handful of cities around the country, trying to figure out where I'd be. I thought I'd probably land in Boston, but I ended up in Baltimore, the last place I ever expected to end up, at Black& Decker at the time. So I took a job there designing power tools, which was completely unexpected. But yeah, it's kind of interesting the way that some of these paths will take you in life.
Mhm. Did you have power tools in your portfolio?
I had a tool project. It was actually a vacuum with a power tool kind of theme. Uh, but yeah, that actually led to a lot of online interactions and some really great opportunities that came out of that project.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
All right, Laura, how about you?
I had similar to Karen, I had an internship
Hmm.
this my summer after my junior year, and that I got through basically just cold writing to architecture firms, sending them like a work sample sheet, just any firms that I came across, and then they hired me back, not right away. When I graduated 2008, it was a pretty rough recession that
Hmm.
was getting started. So it was a scramble coming out. And then I did reconnect with them and they hired me. It was not long lived. And then I had to scramble again. So sometimes you come out, you have a rocky first couple years. But it gave me a lot of opportunities to work at different kinds of places. So, that was how it started. That was with just the happening to get this internship.
Very good. Let's hear it for internships. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, so in my senior year at MassArt, I took a wonderful advertising design class with then Professor Marilyn Gabaro. And although I never thought I would work in advertising, about 3 weeks before the end of the semester, uh, Marilyn shared with the class that an opportunity had opened up at Arnold Worldwide, which was then a kind of growing advertising agency in Boston. And she indicated that Cliff Wong, who's also a MassArt alum, was leading a new design group from one of their new clients, Volkswagen. And she said, well, if anybody's interested, I'll put you in touch with Cliff. Well, sure enough, about a week later, I was interviewing at Arnold. And I think a week after that, I had accepted a position. And a week after graduating, I started working under Cliff at Arnold Worldwide, doing art direction and graphic design for Volkswagen. So that was a great start. I did have to learn a lot of new skills on the fly as I first started out, as we all do. But I suppose that's a good example of the power of not only networking, but the connections that MassArt has afforded me.
Yeah, as a fellow graphic design student and remembering the power that Hill Holiday had back then and other ad agencies, you really hit the ball out of the park there. So the next question is about.
People with good hair to say, this is a fine sign. No.
Sorry
Anyway,
about that, folks. I think someone was unmuted, but
that's okay.
we get to go
So the next question is about, your MassArt experience, and you all have very dynamic, very strong careers. Is there something that you come back to at MassArt that, for me, there's one working designer in my sophomore year. She had an office on Broad Street. I showed up to her office to show her some of my work. And one thing she just, after looking at it, she said, the most important thing is everything on the page has to have a reason. And so you look at your composition as a way of self-assessing. And so that's something, I had a lot of great professors, Al Gowan, Madeline Barrow, but that, I don't even know the name of this professor. You can't, that's something I've taken with me from my MassArt experience. So this question is like, is there something particular like that? Or is there some sort of a moment in your career journey or at MassArt that keeps the flame lit for you today? And anybody else want to start, or shall I ask somebody? I see Jim. Jim has an answer.
So thinking back on this question, so this actually takes me back to my first time on the MassArt campus. I was actually taking a tour of MassArt, thinking that I'd probably apply to be a graphic designer. But then, so actually, my tour guide was actually a good friend of mine now, Derek Cassio, and he introduced me to industrial design on that tour. And at that moment, I was like, wow, okay, this is an extension of what I think I know in design or what have learned to date, but it adds an extra element of tactility and this three-dimensional element that I kind of fall in love with. And that was kind of my introduction to what industrial design even was. That kind of kickstarted everything.
Very good. Very good.
And I'm happy to jump in
Yeah.
because honestly, it's so funny. I was thinking about this a little bit, and you mentioned tour guide. I was a tour guide, and one of my moments, it's very interesting when I think back. One of the things that's always been really important to me is really to like stay true to who I am and what
Mm.
I love doing. Um, and as a tour guide, when I first got the position as a tour guide, I think I worked about 8 hours a week, and I think I made $8 an hour. So, but it was something, right? So, interestingly enough, I used to look really crazy back then. I had a face full of piercings. I had blue hair down to my waist, and I remember asking them, do you need me to tone down my look in order to do this? And the answer was no. They said, no, we want students to see what this is really like. We want the parents to know what it's really like here. And that like blew my mind. Like that was honestly like this like moment for me where it was so important to me at that time, especially to like really express myself. And I did a lot of that very visually, right? So it was like, everything to me. And I actually have carried that throughout my career. Like I've never worked anywhere where it was a problem with the way I looked or anybody. And I kind of think I've sought out positions at creative companies that are cool with that essentially. So that was always something I really held, as great as like, obviously the discipline and the facilities and everything were at MassArt. That's one little thing that always has stuck with me. And I talk about it all the time to this day. So,
Very good. Very good. That was excellent.
so stay true to yourselves and your craft. And that I think can take you places.
Mm. That's right up there with fearless for a MassArt slogan. How
All
about
right.
you, Dan?
Okay. Well, I was thinking back on my time as an undergrad at MassArt, and there was a woman, I don't know what her position was. Someone might know. Mindy Nuremberg was her name. And she essentially got students involved in all things related to community, within MassArt and outside of MassArt. And even though that wasn't part of my core studies, it's one thing that really kind of shaped my views as a designer and within the design profession itself. So, sort of everywhere I've gone since then, and through that experience, I've embraced this notion of community. And it's funny, Jim earlier mentioned Derek Cassio, and is one way to kind of exemplify this is Derek Cassio went on to found Design Museum Boston alongside Sam, his good friend Sam Aquilano. And they came to me, at the time it was like, we have this crazy idea. We want to start this organization in Boston around design. We're going to call it Design Museum Boston. And I said, well, count me in. Let's do it. And so Boston in MassArt has, like, I think somewhere embedded in its DNA, this notion of community. And I've really leaned into that and enjoyed that as part of my uh, experience. So that was my kind of aha moment at MassArt that has carried me
Excellent.
forward. Yeah.
Very good. That may explain maybe your movement into education.
Right.
So Laura, your time at MassArt.
So I'll say when I first read this question, my knee jerk was like, oh no, what there was no aha moment. There was
Right.
no moment. Like it's all just accumulative and experiences. But the more I think about it and have been thinking about it, a big thing that sort of came out of it that was really cumulative was the architecture professor at MassArt, Paul Hajian, would always talk about the human scale of design. And that, of course, then is a big thing for architects, and it's especially for MassArt architecture grads, is talking about always thinking about the human scale because people use spaces. And as I got into working at firms and working with people with different backgrounds, I discovered that was not something that everyone thought about when they were designing spaces or places. They were just sort of, let's look cool, let's look great, let's have something flashy sometimes. I worked for a long time in corporate design, so it was very about appearances, but that's where people are going to sit and spend their whole day. So throughout every place I've worked in like corporate design and residential, and now even in engineering, I just try to think about this is about a person in a place. So, it's like if you're in an office, I was thinking, okay, this is about the person. This is if you want to do a big accent wall and it's bright red. And now this person is like got a bright red wall looking at them all day. Is that something good for people? So it's always just like coming back to it's about the people in the space, and even in engineering, it's about making spaces really comfortable for people. Is kind of how I frame it when I talk about what I do now. It's a little bit different, but so that did become a through line in my way I think about it.
I like that. That's kind of like my modus operandi. It's like, why is it there on the page? And
yeah,
scale.
It's very similar. I think a lot of MassArt education comes back to like having some purpose, not just it's not just how it looks. It's also having some purpose.
So I like it. Our first two questions have kind of given the audience a sense of like where everybody's coming from and how their education is tied into it. Now let's get a little bit into the nitty gritty of, how do you actually find your position? And so, Dan, I want to address this to you. This is about, you are the head of AIGA. And I don't want to necessarily use that word networking because that makes people want to run for the door. But how about creating a network? And is there a difference between hard networking and soft networking? And also, finally, you can do a pitch for the AIGA, but sometimes these places maybe they have good student rates, but sometimes you have to wonder, like there's usually a bit of a price. But I know that the AIGA events, when I used to go to them, they were a great source of community.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with the basics. I think most of us know, but I don't want to skip over it. Nearly every profession has a professional organization, and certainly within design, all my panelists could share their respective organizations. But within Boston, especially, we have very strong professional design organizations, and I just happen to currently lead the board for AIGA, which mostly represents communication and graphic designers. But if you're an architect, of course, there's the AIA, and in Boston, for whatever reason, we still call it the Boston Society of Architects. It's a bit of an anomaly in that way. And then for Jim, if I get this wrong, correct me, but for industrial design, it's IDSA, right?
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
How about for Karen? Is there an organization for fashion?
I think each city would have one. For Massachusetts or Boston, I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, there's probably something. I just don't know what.
Right.
But,
And right. And for example, like I'm a member of it's the Costume Designers Union, which
yeah.
So each city would have that type of thing also. So
yes. So as Ed mentioned, sometimes and UXPA, that's a good one. Thank you in the chat. Some of these organizations are not free, like you pay dues, because in return, those organizations represent their professions in various ways. AIGA has a student membership that's slightly cheaper than a professional membership. So I'll put the link in the chat in a little bit if people want to check it out. But through those opportunities, like Ed said, it's also a good platform for networking. And now that I'm teaching, I use this example with my students, and I talk to them about how to get out of what I call the digital pile. Like, when I was going to school in the 90s and you were sending in your resume, it would probably be in a physical pile and they'd sort through them and they'd bring certain people in and they'd shortlist list people. And then you hope to be, the number one choice. Now it's so abstract. It's like I call it the digital pile because you're like sending in stuff through LinkedIn and all these job boards and stuff like that. And I'm sure my fellow panelists also have some thoughts on this, but I encourage young folks to somehow get out of the digital pile. And to do that, there's many things you can do, but certainly using the example of a professional organization, showing up to events and meeting people face to face, introducing yourself, letting them know what you do, and then as a follow-up, maybe looking them up on LinkedIn and connecting with them. And you can, of course, send them an email. Sometimes, of course, emails get lost because professionals are really busy and they can get buried. So don't ever be offended if you send an email and don't get an immediate return. But the nice thing about the face to face is you're there, it's in real time, you have the opportunity to connect and make a real connection. So that's one way that I think AIGA has been helpful to me. If you want to take it a step further and really get to know people, the next step would be volunteering for events. And then you get more face time and you can then in many cases through design apply your skills and volunteer and do some design work for either the professional organization or an organization they're working with. And then the next step up, of course, is then trying to get on some sort of leadership role. And then, this has really been my path. I went from just showing up at events to volunteering to then serving on a committee, and then serving on the board. And now I'm heading the board. And then I'm going to take a rest. So hopefully that answers the question.
Does anybody else want to speak to the way of connecting? Yes, Karen.
I just absolutely echo what Dan just said. Thank you for elaborating there too, though. That was great because I know if I've been out of work, one thing I always started doing was volunteering. So, I remember one time it was some fashion event and I ended up, putting tablecloths on the tables. And I think I was a little overskilled for that, but you know what? It didn't matter. So I was there, I was out of the house, I was talking to people in the industry and everything. So I do echo that and think that's great. Just like you said to these organizations and again, like I'm in a union where, in that case, there are dues and you do have to be a union member in order to get the union job. So that's almost like a whole community in and of itself, where the people that work in the industry oftentimes work with the same crew on, freelance jobs. Yeah, and just I think, there's power in like keeping in touch with people of your past and not burning bridges. I mean, honestly, as silly as that sounds, I think it's great if you do leave a job to kind of leave on good terms, no matter what or how much maybe you don't want to. But I think that there's people who have left with guns blazing in companies that I've been at. And I think to myself, my gosh, I would never hire that person based on the way they reacted to, certain, things and conditions or whatever it is in the workplace. So yeah, I think it's just kind of, I know that's not about networking so much, but at the end of the day, like I think it kind of is because I would potentially hire somebody in the future or not hire somebody in the future, sometimes based on things like that.
Yeah, it's about human relations, right?
Human relations. That's a much better way of putting
polite.
it.
Yeah. I don't know if Laura and Jim want to add to this or not.
Sure, yeah, I could add to that. I think, as Karen mentioned, I mean, as you go through your career, you'll there's a chance you'll have periods where you are looking for work or you're out of work. And I think, you know, you like to think of those periods as the times that are most important to network. Arguably, the best time to network is when you don't need the work and you can actually build those relationships and not really, have that stress hanging over your head for, you know, lining up that next job or that next gig. I think that being said, I have been very guilty of not doing that, not following that advice, and I think it's just a natural path to fall into. You get busy. It's just you kind of get complacent with your networking, but then it's important to just rebuild those connections. And I think it can feel awkward at first, um, but I found that every connection I've made over the years has been really excited to reconnect and become a really wonderful resource. And it's been just nice to reconnect with people from, years past or from jobs past.
That's hilarious. I'm guilty of that too. I've been pretty comfortable where I'm at, and maybe it's time to start connecting.
Mhm. It has to be kind of fun. It has to be something, you have to be drawn to leave the house, go to the event, and, you know, you always try to find up make an apple for yourself or a carrot for yourself. So the next question is actually for Jim, and I understand that you have some experience with mentoring, with either being a mentor yourself or actually working with the mentor. And so that's
Yes. So
something that, is kind of informal. Like I've always wondered if I ever really had a mentor or just somebody I kind of watched. A mentor gives back. That's what's the difference in having just a professional that you respect and you kind of shadow. That's not a mentor. So tell us a little bit more about a mentor and how other people maybe can, benefit from that idea.
yeah, I think well, it took me probably longer than I want to admit to understand that concept and to understand how to engage with a mentor and how to ask for help. I think asking for help in general can be just hard for a lot of people to do. And I know I struggle with that sometimes. Um, but I've been fortunate to work alongside people that have been very generous with their time and very gracious with their willingness to spend time and share their experiences with me. I thought originally when I was seeking a mentor that this is somebody that will answer all your questions and will put you on the right path and will open doors for you. I think there's some truth to that, but I've found that the mentors especially that have been most helpful to me have been people that rather than give me answers have given me questions to think through and have turned the questions around to me. Um, you're the decision maker. You're the person driving your own career. I think it makes sense for you to be the one answering these questions. But I think the best mentors will give you the tools to make those decisions. So I feel like I've encountered these mentors and found these mentors at kind of pivot points along my career where they've either helped me to make a pivot or helped me to think through how to level up to the next level, whether it's learning new skills, whether it's unblocking some relationship or some interdisciplinary challenge, or just thinking, how do I get through this challenge with my team, type thing. I feel like if you take from that, it's only right to give back to it. So I've tried to be just as generous with my time with team members, friends, just people that I've networked with over the years, and try to offer that same resource.
Oh, very good. Um, Karen, Laura, Dan, do you have any particular people that you remember as being a mentor in your careers?
I'll say I do not know that I've had a individual person that is a mentor. And I would like to just echo what Jim said, that sometimes it's not like here's this one person who is the mentor and they give you the path. It like because I've taken this career pivot and I'm in a new place, I have just been sort of finding people who can guide me in a new kind of like different work environment where we have different objectives. And it's sometimes it's just like you want to get lunch today, and then you just talk about your day, and you're learning something intangible, and then that's huge. So next week you go, oh my God, that was really useful. Now I know how to do something that I didn't before. So it for me, it's I don't think I've had one person, but I did just want to echo that it's sometimes very intangible and you're not sure while you're talking to somebody what you're getting out of it, but it's worth spending the time with people and then again giving it back to people when you do have something to share. So that's where how I've experienced it.
Hey, Karen.
That was a good answer, and I agree with you. I can't say that I had one person either, like one specific mentor who really guided me through anything. But I can say, you know, I worked at one place for 6 years, and this was at my first job, which was at a place. It was called Lip Service, which actually did a lot of, you know, club wear and fun kind of clothing. It was fantastic because it was almost like the sky's the limit and the more the merrier. But having said that, the owner ran a really tight ship and he was really hard on us. And I think because of that, I look back at it now, you know, I liked when you used the word fearless. I basically, we had to do everything. We had to you know, I almost think it might not be the same way now, but it was very back then, right? So I'm going back to the 90s. This was kind of before the shift between, you know, doing everything by hand and doing everything by a computer happened. And it really, I think, helped me because we had to figure everything out on our own almost. I feel fearless and like I can do anything. So I do because he was so hard on us, actually, like I always give him credit for where I am today in a really strange way. And while I wouldn't call him a mentor necessarily, I do admire him, and I am thankful that he put us through all that.
Mhm. Dan, do you manage a mentoring program? I thought I saw something like that in your LinkedIn profile.
Yes. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Many of the professional organizations also host mentorship programs. AIGA Boston is right in the middle of, in fact, the signups might have just closed, but if anybody's interested, you could send me a last minute email. Yes, we pair mentors and mentees together as almost like a matchmaking service. And certainly, we're not alone in an organization that does this. Our program is called VO, or version zero. Like, you know, everybody's starting from version zero. And that's been going on for years and it's quite successful. The only other thing I'd mention, though, is I find it quite interesting. We handed out our AIGA Fellow Awards this year. It's the highest award regionally you can get from the AIGA. And I'll note that 2 out of the 3 recipients were MassArt alum. Um, and you know, sitting on the board, you get a lens into these things. And for instance, Darren Bascom, who was one of the awardees, he's also sitting on the MassArt board, as I recall right now, or maybe he did in the past. But one of the reasons Darren received the award, other than being an all-star designer, is that he's been a mentor to so many people. Like it was just unfathomable how many designers said, well, when I called Darren, he answered. Like,
Oh,
sent Darren an email. He said, sure, let's meet for coffee. And it was just like, I don't know if he sleeps at night, but you know, it's two-way. And it's nice to see also when people who do a lot of mentorship are recognized for that. So a little shout out for Darren and folks like that as well.
that's good. That personal story. That's his, you know, giving him his times, making those very good human connections. So my next question is for is, you know, getting deeper into careers, and you know, actually, you know, Dan, you do an amazing parallel track between education and the thriving design world. Karen has been all in for fashion for all 25 years of her career, and same for Jim. Even though he's doing some UX design, it's really just an extension of his industrial design. But Laura, you've taken a little bit of a different of a fork. You've been, I think, maybe a design architect type firm, and now you're into a more specialized, you work with an engineering firm, I think. But tell us a little bit
Yes,
more about your thoughts and how you saw that as a good opportunity.
sure. Yeah. So I moved to DC, to Washington, DC. I always say 10 years ago, but now it's like 12 or 13 years ago. And I worked in different architecture firms. I worked for a residential firm. I worked doing corporate work, interior work. And then I also worked for a firm in Brooklyn, actually working for another MassArt architecture alum remotely before the pandemic and through the pandemic. And we were doing single family, like really, nice custom design work. And when it was sort of time to say, I want to be in an office with people again, I don't want to work in a city that I don't live in. Um, I started to really reflect on what I wanted my next step to be and what was really important to me in the world at that moment. And one place that I felt really drawn to was looking at sustainability and in design and in architecture. And you can imagine there's a lot of places you can work in that that's sort of greenwashing and not that exciting. But I came across this firm that I work for now, where they are almost all engineers. I've never even taken a physics class ever in my life. So they're like, who are you? um, it's incredible the things we do have in common. And it's because what we're doing is solving problems in new buildings and existing buildings, trying to make them better. We do building enclosures, which is sort of the outside of the building, and making the inside a better environment so it doesn't leak. You have the right temperature when you want it, and these things seem like they should be basic, but as you can imagine, in newer buildings especially, they get pretty complex. So I met these people, and I just thought, okay, this is really interesting. So it was something where it would intersect with doing more sustainable design work, but also in a very technical way, where we're not just sort of saying like, look, we got a lead point. And not that there's anything wrong with lead necessarily, but it's not just saying it to say it. We're doing the actual sort of technical work of making sure that the building is functioning the best that it can. And of course, like I said before, it's sort of, for me, it tied back to sort of making better spaces for people. And part of the switch from architecture to engineering was, and I have many friends that are architects here and in Boston, and I love them, but I did not want to work with architects anymore. I one day just woke up and said, I don't want to work with architects anymore. The way architecture works is it's a broad field. You're often running a lot of the project out of your office. It can be overwhelming and time consuming, and sometimes the underpaid and the contracts can be difficult to manage. And I thought I would like to work on a smaller piece of something that is just very, very technical, and just lean into that. And I met the people at this firm, and they are very technically minded, and I really, really liked that. And it actually kind of rang true to me when Karen was saying, don't uh, don't compromise who you are, and when I was with them, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm maybe a little bit like these folks. Like I like getting into this nitty gritty technical stuff. There's nothing exciting about it. There's no cool portfolio piece that comes out of this unless you are a real engineering person.
Yeah.
But it felt like the transition was just these people felt like the right people for me to be around. And so far it's really been true. It's been a really great environment, and it's given me a chance to switch into just looking at something really small, sometimes literally very small. And that was really, it was sort of, I was sort of in the wind for a couple months trying to figure out what would be next. And a lot of what I did at that time was just like cold networking, where I would message people or call people, email people that I had no idea who they were, but their job sounded interesting, and ask them what they did and what they thought about transitioning into the field they worked in. from a background like mine and how that might work and if it was feasible at all. And that was actually, it was really interesting. I really, if you're at odds with what you're doing, like we were saying about networking, I really recommend you don't have to know the person. And if they don't respond, it doesn't matter. You just go to the next person. So
That's truly fearless. Very, very good.
and
That's a good.
when I get nervous, I just say to myself, well, would I respond? If somebody just emailed me out of the blue and said, I think what you do is interesting. How did you get that job? I would say, yes, let's get coffee, of course. Why wouldn't I? So, you'll meet people who are like-minded if you do that. So it was a little bit of just chance that I happened into this. It never would have, like with going to art school, I never would have thought, oh, I could work for an engineering company. But because it's a lot of problem solving, and MassArt does have a relatively robust sort of technical architecture component, I was able to just make this transition, and it is hard to make a big career transition. It's a little bit scary, and there's a lot of imposter syndrome. So you just get up and keep going every day.
That was very inspiring, Laura. Very inspiring.
So if you're I didn't mean to mute, sorry. If you're not happy where you are, there's changes and it can be scary, but it can be worth it.
Well, that's perfect. It's an excellent segue into the next question, which is, in your careers, have there been, difficulties during your career paths that you had to navigate? Like, did you have a moment where you said, what am I doing? What am I in this business for in the first place? I want to do something completely different. Or did you have to work your way through a difficult market time, perhaps, like Karen alluded to? Or did you just have a really challenging project that you weren't sure you were going to get through? And this question actually is for everyone. So whoever volunteers first, go ahead. Karen.
I'll go because it's so funny. I actually before you said it, I wrote down the word imposter syndrome. And that's actually crazy that you said that because I don't know, I was going to speak to that a little bit later, but I also kind of what I reposted. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. But when this panel information got posted on Instagram, I reposted the image of all of us, and I jokingly, kind of a joke, I wrote #imposter syndrome. And I did it as a joke, but honestly, like I kind of felt that way. I was like, oh my gosh, they picked me? That's crazy. But don't ever sell yourself short. So, okay, wait, what was the question again?
It was really about when you're navigating difficulties, like in your career path, where there's what was like maybe a challenge that you surmounted.
There was a moment in my career where I had a choice. And I really was at a crossroads almost where I could either go full head on into the costume design industry here in Los Angeles, or I could continue basically in what I would consider commercial fashion design. Very different worlds. They actually don't like each other that much either. Like the costume design world does not care for the fashion design world. I don't know that it works the other way around, but there's a little bit of a, I dare say snobbery around it, but there is a little bit. So I kind of had to make a career choice. And, to this day, I chose almost what I would consider the easy road, right? Because I knew in fashion design, I was going to have, health insurance and I was going to have a steady income, where in costume design, it's a freelance gig essentially. So I would have to it's almost like start at the beginning, start at the bottom and claw my way up again. But I was also really interested in doing that. And I didn't choose that path because at that point, it was like a little more to me about having a steady career and making money, let's be honest, and having health insurance and feeling really secure. And to this day, I wonder what things would have been like, right? I'm like, oh gosh, maybe I would have been a famous costume designer, who knows? But you can't really, honestly, someone once said to me, you need to know that you made the best decision at that moment that you could have made. And at that point, I believe that actually, like you've really got to, oh gosh, I don't know what my advice is with that, with all this commentary, but at some point you will have to make a really hard decision, like on your career, I think. I imagine we've all kind of had to do this or that at some point, and who knows where I would have been. But I do believe, at that moment in time, I made the best decision I could have made at that moment for myself. And I think, things have worked out okay. So
I'll just say that I really agree with that, and that sometimes these decisions you're not just, you think in school especially you're going to make it all about the creative choices, and sometimes you just are making a choice for the life you want to build for yourself a little bit too, because you have to live your life outside of your profession as well, and that can be hard when you come up against it, but it's there's nothing wrong with making a choice for a stable life. It can make everything else a lot better. Like you might beat yourself up once. I've beat myself up and been like, oh, I should have stayed in something a little bit, more interesting. But
having
health
said that
insurance
too,
is great.
I feel like you can always have that as your own thing, right? Like that's something you do outside of work. So
That's right. You do costume work. You do costume work, right?
essentially, yeah, like on the side, I will do some work on, I rarely have time to do it, but when I do, it might take a little longer than expected, but I think it's important to have something of your own as well.
Mm.
I was just going to add to that I think a design career is a journey. It's there are many stops along the way. I think one decision doesn't mean that other ones won't be possible in the future. I think it's if you were to make a pivot or take a job and it didn't work out, I think there's always other opportunities in other directions that one could take. So I think part of the training that I think many of us have, or all of us have gotten from MassArt, uh, allows us to transfer a lot of those skills to other things. I mean, I've done that multiple times, just going from large corporate to consultancies to startups to back to a large corporation, and each of those was a moment in time. I think it's it's a very fluid situation, and something that's not. I don't view it as permanent at all.
Mm.
Can I add to that real quick? This is so silly, but I was listening to an interview once from Gene Simmons, the singer of Kiss, right? Who it was a fantastic businessman on top of, a mediocre singer, right? But I heard an interview with him once, and one of his comments was it was business advice. They asked him, "What's your business advice?" And his answer was, "There's no such thing as failure." And to this moment, I'm kind of like, I don't know about that. But when the way he described it, he was like, there's no such thing as failure. As long as you try and give it your best effort, you haven't failed, you tried. So I actually believe that. I think I think about that all the time. So
this is a bonus guest, a little advice from Gene Simmons. I like that.
yeah, I don't know about him taking other advice from him, but I thought that was nice.
So I think this has been excellent. We've looked at the big career path. Let's go back down to the what our soon to graduate the class of 2025 will be facing over the next 6-9 months, if they're lucky, whatever. But I don't know how many of you interview people, but I'm sure you have all at some point. Please give a primer on what you like to see, or what excites you about a candidate when you interview them. I guess I Karen.
All right. Yeah. Honestly, I do interview people a lot, and I'm very proud of a lot of the people I've interviewed. I seek out candidates who honestly, I seek out candidates who like to do the things that I don't like to do, right? So I don't love doing CAD work that much. I like doing more hands-on work. So if I meet someone who loves to do CAD work, oh my gosh, that's amazing because I hate to do CAD work. So immediately, like that's something that I look for when I'm interviewing someone. But I maybe don't tell them that. But my approach is a little more casual. Like I love kind of like learning about them, and I like having them show me their portfolio, talk through it. Basically, I want to hear how they present and what they have to say about their own work. Um, I love, just almost like getting into a real conversation with them to learn, I don't know, just their style of everything. If they're, I find it endearing if they're a little nervous. So I try to work with them to make the situation a little bit more comfortable. But what was I going to say? Oh, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. Oh my gosh.
Well, it
Maybe
seems like,
maybe somebody else. What was I going to say? It was a really good,
well,
really
when it
good
gets
ending.
back on track, you just interject it in there.
Okay.
So who else would like to talk about interviewing and candidates? Dan.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I've been thinking about, and I've heard other folks thinking about recently as well. I think, there's this notion of, on one hand, cultural contribution, and on the other hand, cultural fit. And, I one of the things that I find promising is more recently, um, folks that aren't just hiring for either, but sort of both at the same time. Not people who just fit in, but people who are different and people who understand the culture, but also have something to add. So I think there's a nice kind of balance between those two things. And then the second one is this notion of thinking versus skills. And some of the places where I've worked, we've talked about what skills we could basically train people to learn if they understand and can contribute to the thinking, the conceptual process, and are good communicators or have other skills. So that's another thing to keep in mind because, of course, especially now that technology is changing exponentially faster, that maybe to some degree for certain things we hedge our bets in terms of skills, knowing that skills are always going to be changing, and in particular software skills.
I remember what I was going to say. I look for someone who is a self-starter. I've worked with a lot of people who, at some point maybe they finished a task and then they just kind of sit there and wait for their next project. I don't love that. Not my favorite that's not my favorite person in the workplace. I do love someone who can bring either some new ideas to the table, or you know what, if I'm not available and they're need something to work on, they come up with their own project that's relevant to what we're working on, or come up to me and say, hey, I want to start working on this, blah, blah, blah. Is that okay? So anyway, I do love someone who is a self-starter. And, as far as an interview process goes, I was in an interview once, and at the very end, it was kind of going mediocre. I was looking for a graphic designer. And at the end, I said, well, okay, do you have any questions before you go? And his answer was, yo, why is your parking so difficult? And I just couldn't believe it. Blew my mind that that was the only question he could think of. And I was like, wow, this guy must not really want a job. And honestly, out of 500 resumes, I narrowed it down to 12 candidates, and he was one of them. And that was what I got. So I'm like, I spent all this time. You were one of them. I picked you, and now you're here. And that was his answer or his question. So I also think a thank you letter goes a long way. And maybe I'm a little old fashioned, but I remember when people send thank you letters. So, that to me is meaningful, and there's something about that. And it's a great way to just follow up also, instead of saying, what about the job? I think just even honestly, whether it be email at this point or a handwritten letter, I do think a thank you letter is mandatory.
Yeah, as part of that whole thing that we're talking about here, it's not so much not networking, it's human connections. And just remember, you want to be treated the way you treat people the way you want to be treated. And that take that extra moment. Everybody's not just a number.
And I think I'd add one more thing to that. I think sometimes you go through the interview experience and it goes really well and you still don't get the job. And I think the way you handle that actually goes a long way because it's a small world and you'd be surprised who you run into later. And sometimes if you handle that failure or that loss with, a little bit of grace and a little bit of kindness, um, it may end up as it may result in another job down the line or just another connection. But I've had that happen a few times where either I didn't get something and got a call back a couple years later. Hey, like just wanted to catch up with you and see how things are going. Maybe things are in alignment now. And I've also had that happen on the other end where I've had a candidate where it just wasn't the right fit, but they were still a great candidate, and a more suitable role opened up for them later that became available, and they were a top pick as a result. So I
That
think
makes
the
it
way
great.
you handle failure can be, just as important as the interview process.
Very good. So I think that perhaps the last question before we move on to questions from the audience, and this is stepping way back, is if you could each share where you think your particular field is going and the future of it, what type of either skills or mindset will be helpful. And I'll take volunteers.
A
Thank you,
tough
Karen.
question. Go.
Go,
I was
Karen,
going to
you
say,
step up.
Dan, if you want to go, it's cool. Go ahead.
I mean, I'll just share one thing that I've been thinking about that may be kind of indicative of your question. Um, my sense is that leaning into this notion of multidisciplinarity right now may not be a bad thing. Of course, this is a choice and a trade-off between specific expertise within a discipline of design, or even within that discipline, a certain market segment or expertise. And then, of course, using IDEO's well-known metaphor, they talk about T-shaped people, people with deep expertise and kind of a wide set of skills simultaneously. But I've been thinking more about the wide set of skills, and it seems lately I've been picking up on more people like Laura, who have like sort of moved from one silo into another pretty easily and seamlessly, like from architecture to engineering. And at MassArt, I think this is actually in particular for the institution a strength, where you see these alumni. Um, See if I can think of one like Kelly Wersler, if anybody's ever heard of her. I believe it's like she studied graphic design like way back when, and now she owns like a luxury home goods brand. That's quite a leap. Or on the art side, hopefully a lot of people know who this is. William Wegman, who studied painting and has made a living as a fine artist, photographing his dogs, right? It's like, and there's a comfort with that that is like embedded again in like the DNA of mass art. So maybe that's a strength and it's something for more of us to consider.
So, Jim, what do you see as a future of industrial design?
I, that's such a tough question. I mean, there's so many ways you could go with that. I mean, I think one of the uh, over the last couple of years, I mean, tools have gotten incredibly powerful, and I think that's changed the way the industry has evolved even over the last couple of years. I mean, like when I was going to school, um, rendering and like visualization of products was a highly desirable skill. Now it's been like arguably commoditized, where it's much easier to come up with and create very compelling uh, renderings and imagery of the products that you're working on. I think now it's being, now you're having AI products start to enter that segment of design, and I think there are a lot of questions about how that will influence or impact the industry. I think to me, I've always viewed these as tools, and I've been designing for like close to 20 years now. It's kind of crazy to even think that, but um, over those years, the tools have evolved to a level that I could never even have imagined when I was in design school, and staying up to date with that, uh, using them just for fun, just to learn and understand, where I could go with them, it has kind of kept me current, and not being afraid to try something new and bring it into my workflow, into my practice, has, I think, kept things both interesting for me and kept my skills sharp. So yeah, I would encourage people to just experiment, be curious, try new tools, and don't be deterred by how others might tell you uh, the tools might influence your future work.
Good. Karen, fashion future.
So right now, consumer products are under fire. This has been a crazy week, and yesterday, tariffs were introduced for for exorbitant tariffs have been introduced for consumer products coming into the United States from various countries, and I don't even know where to begin with all this because it's
Madness.
it's really affecting how we're working and who we're working with, what countries we're importing from, and I mean it's changing week by week actually. So it's been very volatile actually this week. But in addition, I'm over here kind of fighting the good fight, trying to fight the good fight against artificial intelligence. I'm so freaked out by it. I am, and I think too. I think like even in the movie industry here, there's a lot of concern about that. And I don't know if you guys hear as much about it as I do, but I feel like there's a lot of actors and people in that industry really, really kind of speaking out very loudly against artificial intelligence and the usage of likenesses and art, for example, art really. So I don't know what to say about it because the owner of the company that I work for is automating a lot of things. He's automating our pick and pack system, and he thinks Chat GPT is super cool. And I'm just over here like, oh my gosh, how do we get out of this? I don't know that it's a battle that I'm ever going to be able to win. So I agree with Jim. Really, it's like kind of like experimenting maybe and like what works for you. And I do believe in like, it's funny because even in Photoshop, for example, there's just some tools that have really made my life a lot easier. So I need to look at it as a tool, just like you would, a drill or a hammer, right? So, and if it can make the work you do get done more quickly, hey, that's actually really cool. So that's actually a really good thing. So anyway, so embrace what you're comfortable with. But as far as fashion design, I know there's a lot of concern about we're always going to need clothing, I guess. Stupid as that sounds. So I'm not too worried about it. And I do think, I hope that the future of fashion is more about sustainability and less about fast fashion. And truly, I do believe there's really an art to it. So I love that about it. And I think it's here to stay, guys. Hey.
Yeah. I saw a picture of a model, and there was two pictures of her, and one was digital and digitally created, and the other one was a real photograph. And you could not, there, you couldn't tell.
That's crazy.
So Ed, I think we need to move on to the Q&A session.
Oh, we want to let Laura give a peek into the future of architecture and buildings. And
Sure,
our
sure.
building going to become more human centered or less?
Uh, hard to say. I think, and this is, I'll be really quick because I know we are short on time, but it is sort of echoing a lot of it. I mean, these design fields have a lot of similarities, and um, like Jim said, when I was coming out of school, it was a huge deal to come out with technical skills, come out with rendering skills and building modeling skills. And now it really is like, well, you probably have enough of that. You'll figure it out on the job. If you have to learn it, you'll learn it. Nobody cares. I mean, at least in my experience lately, it's like, just whatever, we'll get you some training if you need it. No big deal. What is really is become more about as far as like working day to day is what you can bring as a person in the office and in the work environment. And it's more about the, again, like people connection. So coming back to that and what you can sort of do that AI or technology can't do, which is, you know, like now I'm in a consulting environment, so it's really about people and relationships. But even in just a traditional architecture office, what kind of design thinking can you bring that is different or unique or problem solving that's sort of human based? So that's an important skill to come out of school with. Obviously, you have to have some of the basics, but it's not the focus perhaps that it once was. And if you're getting a push that it's a focus, just remember you'll pick it up. It's fine. So yeah, I'll stop there.
All right, thank you, Laura. So yes, well, thank you for everyone for this portion of our evening. So Darlene, do you want to move us into the audience questions?
Sure. Now that we've gone into the Q&A session, feel free, if you have a question for one or all of the panelists, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you have a question that you'd prefer to put in the chat, Olga can read it out for you. Nada, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I was like, I was just about to raise my hand, so you predicted it. I always have questions. Yeah, I think I have a question for Jim. So I'm also in industrial design, and I always have questions a lot. But I guess I was curious, like, if you have any advice, because like I think I've been struggling because like I have a degree in human factors, and when I was in human factors, like I wanted to design, and they were like, you should go to design school. I'm in design school, and it's like I'm not gonna go for like a fourth undergrad, but like I feel like I always like think about how things are made, and it's like frustrating because like I wish I knew like the engineering, so because I think the function and how things are made and manufactured would influence the form. And I think I'm
Hmm.
really frustrated as a design student being like, I just don't want to like think about, oh, I want to make something sleek because like for me, for example, right now I'm working my senior design project is about a dog toothbrush. So then I did a lot of research on like, is it hygienic? Like what's out there in the market? Like I'm taking a business class on like if I were to get like tubes from like China or whatever, like there's a lot of like more into it where I feel like I'm struggling with like the traditional sense of industrial design, which I honestly at this point accepted, but I think it's like hard to like I feel like I'm still kind of stuck where it's like if I'm like I have an idea in my mind, but like I kind of want to cat it up, but at the same time it's like each mechanism it's like a stuck point basically. And like I want to talk more to engineers, but I was wondering if you have any experience of like things that may be different materials or things that are like unconventional of like how do you go about if manufacturing is a big part of the design process because I don't think like we talk enough about manufacturing as like sorry for everyone else. It's a very specific ID question, but yeah, you get a sense of what I'm trying to ask. Basically, incorporating manufacturing, but also like not being stuck on like I don't know what the how the mechanism is, so therefore I don't know what the design is. So like, I guess advice maybe that would be applicable for everyone else is like you can also give it advice of like how to get beyond the stuck point if a certain design.
So,
You,
No, that makes sense. I think it's totally natural to be stuck in your process and to kind of be in that cycle. I think uh, I've had that many times where there's been a challenge that I just could not figure out how to get out of. Uh, totally a natural part of the process. I think you'll often encounter questions that you don't even know are questions sometimes. And I think just asking people and starting conversations with, for example, engineers or somebody with engineering experience, if you're
Yeah,
looking
that was actually,
for, questions on like
yeah,
how to make something.
yeah,
Um,
that was
but it
actually
sounds
my
like,
next step. Yeah.
oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
That was actually my next step because I befriended a couple of people from one tour. So like my next step was just like I was like I'm gonna give up and go across the street and start
I
asking.
mean,
But I was
I
wondering
think like
like if you had
one
a
piece. Okay, so I think like one piece of advice I give is I think and I probably learned this a little too late. I think when I had design problems, I only asked designers how to solve them. And now that I've had the experience to work in large, cross-functional teams, I've realized the value in creating relationships way outside of design. I think even, once you kind of started to touch on this is a lot to unpack, but even once you figure out how to make it, then you have to figure out how to sell it and how to get it in a store and how to get it produced. And there's so many layers to actually making a product reality. Um, it takes far more than just the design team. So I think I'd recommend just building relationships with people that are not designers and creating conversations there. I think you'll probably start to get answers to questions that you didn't even know you had.
that's actually reassuring because that's like my instinct. So it's good to know that like I'm not doing something wrong because I feel like I'm like the type who like goes and talks to a lot of people but it ends up me I feel like I'm digressing from the project. So it's kind of reassuring to hear you say that. So thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the
Great.
question.
Does anyone else have a question?
We have a question from earlier in the conversation, and I'm so sorry I did not write down who it came from. But the question was, is it a good idea to reach out to a place you worked at 10 years ago when you were a sophomore in college, or an internship you left or worked at briefly?
And that was Kyle. Did you want to add to that?
Yes, and I think I can answer. So basically, I interned at a local news station in the Boston area. I'll say the name. It was Seven News, and I think the department I applied to, they already filled up for the summer, and so then I was in a smaller department, and I think I didn't have like a lot of interaction with my mentor supervisors, so I think I, in a way, was possibly spin my wheels. So that led me to leave the internship about midway through the summer, and there wasn't any negative reaction per se, but I was just wondering, like, what if I stuck out for the summer and like if that might have changed things or not? And I think my other question is like, how do you get into a creative field if you feel like your resume covers so very across the board, much more general, I will say.
I was having a little trouble understanding the last question.
Yes, I can repeat it.
Sorry.
The second question is basically how would one get into a creative fields or career field if you feel like when you look at your resume or your past experience, it's a bit kind of like scatterpoint, a little bit varied in like multiple different industries that aren't necessarily.
Right. Gosh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think too, I think it's sometimes smart to, and I know it's difficult because I feel like I feel like if you're applying for jobs, it's a little more difficult now. I remember having to really um, make different resumes really for different types of positions. So I might gear one resume a little bit more towards, apparel manufacturing, for example, and then another one would be a little bit geared more towards art or something. Like one was a little bit more artistic, one was a little less artistic, right? So, and I do think filling it up with, again, like, uh, gosh, almost like, Dan mentioned organizations or volunteering, right? Like if it's something that's really relevant to what it is that you're going towards, then I think that is fantastic. And I love that kind of stuff. Like I actually love seeing what people do outside of work. So I do think it's certainly not inappropriate or anything to add things like that to your resume, as long as it makes sense, kind of in the context, or it's still, artistic based or design based. I don't know. There's something to that I think is really great. Um, and I think it's just kind of like polishing it up a little bit. I'm not saying, that you need to lie or anything like that, but it's just like, I think kind of organizing it and polishing it up and kind of, and maybe a little embellishment here and there doesn't hurt. So
Yeah, there's something good. There's something good in the chat there, Kyle.
Yeah, we have something from Daniela.
Oh, yes, sorry. We have a question from Daniela. Daniela is wondering what is the process of making a portfolio, and how should you show your portfolio to job interviews? How does that work? Is it all digital now? And are there any tips on what to show in your portfolio?
I like that question. They're so fundamental.
Jim, could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I think it depends on. I mean, I can speak to that from an industrial design and maybe UX design standpoint. I think I've found that when I'm creating a portfolio, I have multiple versions of my portfolio. Just like Karen was saying for the resume, a one size fits all portfolio and or resume may not work anymore. I feel like it worked before. I've definitely used that approach in the past, but I didn't have a lot of success with it in the last couple of years, honestly. And I feel like now my approach is to kind of attack it like any design problem where I have a very clear storyline. What you remove from your portfolio is probably just as important as what you put in it. Keep projects and content in it that's pertinent to what you're applying to, and really try to create that clear storyline. Uh, that really sets you apart, I think, in my experience, from other candidates that will just put every project they've ever worked on or just a smattering of various works that they've been part of. I think it's just, it's telling a story clearly and also targeting it to the audience that you're trying to pitch to.
And yeah, people can answer to it, the format.
Oops. Aaron?
Ed, you're muted.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I can speak to it really quickly because I have been interviewing people recently. I do think that, and it's very overwhelming now, right? So you're not looking at 20 pieces of paper. You're literally looking at 500 resumes that come through. And I find it really helpful when a resume comes, an e-resume, let's say, comes through, and there is a link to a website or a space, right, online where I can view your portfolio. Interestingly enough, a lot of people put their photos on their resumes now, which was bonkers to me because that was like a big no-no back in the day, or anything like cute or fancy. Interestingly enough, I picked somebody because there was a photo and they were smiling, and I was like, this looks like a great guy. He'd be fun to work with. So I don't know. There was something about that. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I thought that was very interesting, that it really did resonate with me. And I took note of this person's smile, really. So, but otherwise, a quick link to a resume and portfolio is helpful. And having said that, I need to take my own advice there. So
That's great. And
We have a couple of, oops, sorry, we had a couple of folks who have raised their hand for questions. We have Alifa. Alifa, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Alifa, she, hers. I'm currently in the Communication Design Certificate program at MassArt. And I have a question about avoiding that digital pile that was mentioned earlier. I did a full rebrand for one of my favorite burger spots in Boston. New logo, brand pattern, mock-ups, all that good jazz for my portfolio. And everyone was like, this is really good. You should pitch it to them. You should definitely like, I even did a social media campaign, redesigned their menus, like a whole thing, because I'm obsessed and I love that branding. And so I was wondering, like, I did send like, a generic email through their generic email info at, whatever. But I was wondering, like, if y'all were trying to actually get in front of like important decision makers or trying to get out of the email spam box, like what your advice or what you would do in order to pitch your rebrand to the restaurant.
Excellent question. Who's been having to do that?
I maybe can give at least one perspective on it. I always think there's power in like connections of connections. So you can, most of us here are visual thinkers, but you can almost map out relationships. And if there's someone that you're sort of trying to get to, you can sometimes kind of back out like degrees of connection. And I know like LinkedIn sort of tries to do this because it's like will show you like, how you're connected to people. But I find that in the same way, if you just have a conversation like you're doing now, and you tell people like what you want to do, it's amazing how small the world is sometimes. And they'll say, well, why don't you talk to this person? And then you talk to that person. And then they say, well, you should talk to this person. And before you know it, you're talking to the person that you really want.
Gotcha.
It's this weird like web of people. So that's some advice. And it's an excuse to network in and of itself, which can, even aside from your core objective, possibly lead to other things that you haven't even thought of.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah, that's a good answer, Dan. It's better than mine. You have three. You have mail, regular mail, a phone call, and email. But Dan's saying, well, try that with not just the target.
Oh, so you mean like maybe if I actually mailed my presentation to their like headquarters as like a backup in
Something
case I went to spam in the email.
somewhere. Yeah. And then follow it up with a phone call. And it's not easy, but that's the only tools you have. All right. Next question, Olga.
We have Vinny. Vinny's our next person in line. Do you want to go ahead, Vinny?
Oh my God. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
This is
Hi,
for
Vinny.
Dan, and oh my God, it's like I'm meeting a celebrity because I've volunteered for the AIGA and I'm a current member. I know Amy very well because I have a friend who goes to Mecca, so that's fierce. Um, so I have a question. I have experience working with both small and large companies. I've worked with like some really exciting people, and I'm trying to break into agency life, but it feels like this sort of like I don't know. It feels like a party I'm not invited to. I don't know how to like you if you have any advice for that. It's just like it is absolutely where I want to be, and it's just I don't know. It all seems very daunting when I look at, other people's work and like their own portfolios. It feels like a world that I'm very not used to, which is, I'm very experienced in like a couple other internships, but any advice on that from anyone, just like any agency, but particularly Dan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny, and thank you for supporting AIGA. I'll tell just a very brief story about when I started at Arnold in the early 2000s. And there was a gentleman, Luke Perkins, who started about the same time I did. And Luke worked in the studio, and I'm dating myself here, but basically, what Luke did every day was scan other people's artwork. Like he would sit next to a computer, people would bring a sketch, and he would scan it. Or you bring a sketch and you make a vector illustration out of it, and he would scan it and upload it to the server. And he did that for like a year before he got his first like next design opportunity. They said, well, let's put Luke on this project. And then he killed it, and then he got his next project and he did well in that. And if you can believe it, Luke is now the global head of design for Coca-Cola.
Oh my God. I love that.
So, I mean, this is a rare trajectory, admittedly, but it just dramatizes and is emblematic of this notion of like sometimes if you just get in the door and do the thing and ask for an opportunity and then succeed with that opportunity, that can take you pretty far, right? And but the challenge is like just getting in the door, and sometimes, well, like we don't want to be the person scanning. If that's what it takes, then maybe that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Well, uh, thank you for the question.
Hmm.
And I think we have something from Kyle about what cities?
Yeah. I was more kind of then, and I was kind of curious on like just the panel's overall thoughts on the animation industry, whether it's video animation, etc., and how do you think it's evolved in the past 10 years? And that was more of a general, but yeah, I did answer, or I did ask about the students.
I mean, really briefly, I'm in Los Angeles. So obviously, I think that is at least one of the main hubs for I actually worked as an illustrator in the Costume Designers Union on feature films. So there still is, it's crazy that they still have that position actually, but there are a lot of old school people that work here that love like hand drawing still. It's amazing. So it's unbelievable that they still do that, but it is something that can be sought after. And clearly animation, this is to me the place to be, but I'm not sure. I'm sure there's other locations. I did know someone who was an animator. His first project I remember he worked on was the movie Cats and Dogs, which is computer animated. And he now works for in London, actually, I believe at Warner Brothers or something. I would say that industry, it depends on all what you're looking for, but I also feel that industry is breaking out into many other locations. And it isn't centered so much in Los Angeles, but there's a lot of work, I believe, in Toronto. I'm sure they're building things in various other places, but briefly, I mean, in my role, Los Angeles still has animation studios. So
That's excellent. Thank you so much. I was kind of curious because I heard of Cartoon Network, but I know in feature films like for Disney, etc., they're trying to likely prefer it. So that's cool.
Right. So Kyle, just to kind of speak to that, are you in the Boston area? Are you a current student at MassArt or an alum?
Yes, I'm a current student in the Communication Design Certificate program, and
Okay.
I took an animation class.
Just wanted to let you know, and I think I mentioned, I know you were at the networking workshop on Tuesday. Dave Schlafman, who is a design lead at Netflix, and he was the founder of Cloud Kids Studios here in Boston with another MassArt alum, Matt Carl. And it was a digital animation studio, and they did work. I don't know if you've heard of Fizzy's Lunch Lab, and they did work for, I think, Cartoon Network. But they are both at Netflix now. He's out in California, and Matt lives on the Cape. But Dave is actually coming to Boston next week. He's going to be on campus. He's joined our Innovation Advisory Council at MassArt, but he's going to be giving a talk at 2 p.m. in the Posen Center to illustration and sim students, but it's open to all MassArt students. So if you want to join, you don't have to register. You can just show up.
So, thank you. What day is that next week?
It's next Tuesday at 2 p.m., 2 to 3:15 p.m. in the Posen Center. Yeah, and anybody who's on this call is more than welcome to join us. I was going to
that
mention.
sounds amazing.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Very good.
But there's actually there. It's on our web calendar of the college if you need to check it out. But we are. Do we have any more questions? We're actually at 8:33, so maybe our panelists would stay for 5 minutes more if anybody else has another question. Or are we all good?
I hear silence.
Yeah, so it sounds like folks
Thank
are
you,
doing.
folks. Laura,
I'll leave.
Dan.
I
Wait,
noticed Dan left his email here. I'll do the same. And Kyle, if you want to talk with me anymore about the illustration and animation thing, I'd be happy to speak with you.
Oh, yeah, that'd be really cool.
yeah, and I'm just going to ask Rebecca to chime in for a few minutes and let you all know what kind of services are offered in career development.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I'm currently the acting director of career development. One thing I want everyone to know, whether you're a student or alumni, you have access to use the career development office. So if you have questions about kind of making your resume clear, telling your story, if you're looking to strategize about starting an internship search or job search, we meet with students and alumni one-on-one. So definitely reach out to us if you're looking for some support while you're a student or even after graduation. So we are here to help.
Great. And then I just wanted to mention we did have a networking workshop earlier this week, and one of the big things that we kind of talked about was MassArt has we have two LinkedIns. We have an alumni LinkedIn group, and we also have, the college has a school group. And the school group has about 16,000 alumni listed there. So if you're looking for a job, say in industrial design, you can go onto that LinkedIn and you can filter by industrial design, and you can filter by Boston or LA or New York or wherever, and any alum who is from that area will pop up, and you can in-message them if you wanted to try to have an informational interview with them. So I would highly suggest that. I'm going to paste the social media links. We also have an alumni Facebook page, a Facebook group, and a LinkedIn. And we do have a couple of other events coming up. We do have an alumni maker weekend that's going to be happening from May 30th through June 1st. If you're graduating this year, we have a graduation celebration brunch that's going to happen on May 21st. And if you're thinking about if you're in New York or you're thinking of moving to New York, we're going to be doing a meetup in New York on June 26th. So stay tuned for more information about that. And we also, for alums, have a MassArt Alumni Haystack Retreat Weekend in Deer Isle, Maine at Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. So I'm going to paste all that into the chat for you all so you have it. In alumni relations, I'm the alumni relations director, and Olga is the assistant director. If you ever have any questions, free to reach out to us at alumni@massart.edu. We're always happy to try to help connect you with other alums who, especially if you find someone on LinkedIn that you would like to talk to, try to message them. And if you don't have luck, we can try to help reach out to them as well. So I'm going to paste all that. Ed, do you have any final remarks?
Yes, I'm putting my email in because I represent the Alumni Association. So if another person to talk to regarding alumni information or whatever follow up from this event, you're welcome to email me as well.
And always remember that the MassArt community is here for you after you graduate. Stay in touch with the faculty members, stay in touch with career development and us in alumni relations. Come to alumni events. Once you graduate from MassArt, you're part of a network of over 22,000 people worldwide. And 16,000 of them are on LinkedIn, so that's a great directory for you. I'd just like to say thank you to Laura and Dan and Karen and Jim for being with us here tonight, and to Steve Rogan, who's a friend of Karen's, who's a MassArt alum and was chiming in on the chat and offering his advice as well. And I believe you said you have one of your kids is a MassArt student right now.
Yeah, my son is a junior at animation major at
That's
MassArt.
great.
Yeah, and so he kind of took after me. I went to MassArt for painting, but my first job outside of MassArt, I became an animator at Soup to Nuts. Had some shows on Cartoon at Cartoon Network, and when I got into that, like I had never animated before in my life. It was my drawing skills and my design skills, and they were just switching over to a new software program. So that's how I ended up getting in, and so I'm just happy that I love the MassArt community.
Thank
It's
you.
been
Stephen.
wonderful.
we will be maybe tapping you for next year's panel.
Absolutely.
And
Be happy
Tanya
to share.
and Tanya Castro-Donay, who is the secretary of the Alumni Leadership Council, just chimed in on the chat saying to, feel free to reach out to the Alumni Leadership Council anytime as well. And you can do that through our alumni@massart.edu email, and we can forward it to them. So I also want to thank Sarah Shikari, who's the vice chair of the Alumni Leadership Council, and Dayan Danye, who is on the Alumni Leadership Council Outreach Committee, for being here with us this evening. It's been a great panel, and we really appreciate you all sharing your advice, your expertise, the ups and downs of your career, and what you look for in candidates. It's been incredibly interesting, and I hope everybody got something out of it. On that, I think we'll say good night, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.